At this time, I'd like to present Imam Shamsuddin.
Assalamu alaikum. Ramadan Mubarak. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulih al-Kareem. Wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Wa nashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah. Wa nashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. I think I'll just hold it. We'll begin by praising Allah and praying that Allah's peace and blessings be upon the final prophet, the Prophet Muhammad, and upon his family and his followers and such. And we affirm that Allah alone is His worship. He sent prophets and messengers throughout time. And we affirm that Muhammad was His servant and His messenger, the final prophet of Allah. May Allah's peace and blessings be upon him. First and foremost, I'd like to thank Imam Ivan and the community here for inviting me here to speak. This is actually my first time ever speaking here. This is my first time ever speaking here. And I wasn't sure as to how long to talk. I had a general idea from the Imam as to what to talk about, but in terms of how long to talk, I wasn't really sure. I didn't want to put people to sleep. Neither did I want to monopolize your time. So I will talk about Ramadan briefly. And I'm not sure if it'll take up 30 minutes or 45 minutes or 3 hours. I'm not sure, but inshallah I will talk about Ramadan briefly. And I should say that the historical significance of Masjid Bilal is not lost upon me. So let's begin by talking about the Quran for a moment. In the verse that all of us know, was probably mentioned in the Friday khutbah here and in the lectures before Ramadan. There is a verse in the Quran which says, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. It says, Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu kutiba alaykumus siyamu kama kutiba ala alladhina min qablikum la'allakum tattaqun. It says, O believers, fasting is mandated on you, as it was mandated on those before you, so that perhaps you will develop in taqwa. And I don't think taqwa is a word I need to talk about too much here. So rather than talking about the word taqwa for the moment, there's another word in the ayah which I would like to talk about. A word which our speakers would not really talk about. Rather than the word taqwa or tattaqun, as it appears in the verse, I want to talk about the word la'alla. La'alla. L-A'-A-L-L-A. La'alla. And the verse says, again, kutiba alaykumus siyamu, is Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 185, I believe. كتب عليكم الصيام كما كتب على الذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون. It says that fasting is an institution that has been given to you by God Almighty, so that perhaps you will develop in taqwa. The word is perhaps, la'alla. La'alla means, it's translated as perhaps, maybe, more than likely, probably. That's how it's translated. So that shows us that there is a chance of failure. You see why people wouldn't want to talk about that? Because using the word or the expression perhaps shows that there is a chance of failure. Perhaps a stronger example, or a more potent example, is required in order to drive this point further. The example of prayer. We know that the religion of Islam demands of us to offer 5 daily prayers. and there are some exceptions. But the general idea, or the general rule, is that there are 5 daily prayers. But what if you're praying and you're thinking about the Cavs game versus the Celtics that happened a few days ago? You're going through the emotions. You're saying the Fatiha. You're saying the words of the prayer, but you have the game in your mind, or you have your financial situation on your mind, or you have some other situations on your mind. So that I'm trying to give real life examples that when you're praying, there's a chance of failure. And when you're fasting, there's a chance of failure. And in the ayah, in the verse from the 2nd chapter, verse 185, if I'm not mistaken, in that verse, that reality is recognized by the presence of that one word. So these are very real things. Praying and not getting anything out of it, and fasting and not getting anything out of it. These are very real possibilities. And these are things that not even if you just look at Islam, but if we look at the theology, the theologians of other religions, in the history of other religions, lay people and theologians of every other religion, if you look at their writings, they likewise encounter this problem. They likewise encounter this situation. So it's a universal problem. It's a universal thing. So if these are real possibilities, that you gain nothing from the fast, and there's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ which talks about those who fast but gain nothing from the fast except hunger and thirst. So if these are real possibilities, and possibilities that are acknowledged by the Quran, if these are real possibilities, then what should we do? What is the solution? How do we gain from the fast? How do we gain from the prayer? There is a lot. Is it making sense so far? Okay. About prayer, I find that more of an important issue to talk about because it's something that we do regularly, whereas as far as the obligatory fast, we only fast 1 month out of the whole year. And perhaps we will talk about prayer more later. But there are some tips that I would like to share. And these tips don't emanate from me. These tips emanate from the writings of one of the greatest theologians, Islamic theologians of all time, Imam Abu Hamid Muhammad Al Ghazzali, or simply Imam Al Ghazzali. I'm introducing his name to the students of religion and to the teachers of religion, so you can look at these things for yourself after I've left. So in his book, I'm going to show you the one of the volumes that I have there. He's written, there are, I believe, perhaps there may be hundreds of books that this man has written. But I'm showing this particular book, this particular volume in English. He has here, is called The Alchemy of Happiness. And it's actually a Persian translation that he wrote. He spoke Arabic as well as Persian. So he wrote, firstly in Arabic, a many-volume book called Ihya'A Ulum Ad-Din, The Revival of Religious Sciences. And he decided to translate that into Persian. And this is a translation, English translation of the Persian. So it's kind of convoluted, right? But he wrote a Persian summary of his Ihya'A Ulum Ad-Din, in which he talks about the legal details of fasting. Like, you had to fast, you had to start the fast at a certain time and end it at a certain time and all that. He talks about the legal aspects, but then he speaks about the secrets of fasting. He gives some tips about fasting. And Next time I'll use a chalkboard for this. So he divides the people who fast, the community of fasters. So the word doesn't sound right in English, fasters, doesn't make sense. The sa'imun. He divides the people who fast into three categories. The first category, he calls it the general people, al-awam, the general people. The second category, he calls the elites. And the third category, he calls the chosen. Now, to me, I feel that number 2 and 3 are inverted. But nonetheless, I have to be honest with the text. This is how the writer of the text has put forth his statements. So, number 1, general people. Remember, this is about fasting. General people. Number 1, the general people. He means the masses of Muslims, all of whom share the same rules in terms of fasting. In other words, there are 1 billion, in today's world, there are 1 billion, in his day it wasn't like that, but in today's world, there are 1 billion Muslims in the world. And the educated and the uneducated, the rich and the poor, all have the same rules and know the same basic information when it comes to fasting. Again, the second category he mentions are what he calls the elites. And actually, this is very interesting. He describes the elites as people for whom, when they fast, they only think about Allah. That's how he describes. The people who are the elites are those whom, when they fast, they only think about Allah. And in fact, he uses a real example in his book. That he says, for example, people who are preparing or thinking about what we're going to have for iftar tonight at the masjid. Who's going to contribute the bean pie? Hint, hint. Who's going to contribute this and who's going to do this? He says that this violates the fast. And he says further, he says this elites, this is the state of the prophets and the people who are really righteous. So he knows that almost nobody can reach that state where when they're fasting that they only think about Allah. So he says only prophets can reach that state. That's what he says. So we're off the hook. The third category of the community of those who fast are what he calls the select. S-E-L-E-C-T, the select. And the select are those who seek to perfect their fasting, to complete their fasting. تكميل الصيام, to complete their fasting. And he mentions 6 ways by which a person completes their fast. So you see earlier I mentioned that it seemed to me that the sequence is inverted. And now we are going to see why. I think that the sequence that he had was a bit inverted. But nonetheless, in terms of select, he has these 6 tips. And if you're taking notes or recording this, please, if you didn't write anything down, write down what I'm about to say now. The first tip, to restrain the eye from looking at that which distracts from God, particularly that which influences carnal appetites. So consider the television shows that we watch, Real Housewives of Hollywood. No, it's just Real House Husbands. You know, that's on Netflix now. And actually, to be honest with you, I've noticed that Muslims have paid attention to this, because most Muslims I know, we all go to movies, we maybe go to concerts and things like that, right? But they say not in Ramadan. They want to get their movie in. Actually, me too, because I just saw Alien Covenant. And I did that before Ramadan started. Right or wrong, that's what I did. Right or wrong. It's better than going to a strip club, isn't it? Can I get an amen? So the first tip, restrain the eye from looking at that which distracts from God. The second tip from Imam Al Ghazzali, to restrain the tongue from useless speech. Again, to restrain the tongue from useless speech. And that's mentioned a few times, not many times, but it's mentioned a few times in the Quran about useless speech, or about, they call it lahw al-hadith. That's how it's termed in the Quran, lahw al-hadith. The third tip, to restrain the ear from listening to that which is inappropriate. And so he gives in his book, and you almost don't even need his examples. He gives in his book examples of, say, gossip and backbiting and lying and things like that. In his day, television didn't exist, obviously. But if he was alive today, it's perfectly possible, God knows best, it's possible that he would tell you, don't turn on the Jerry Springer show. He might say that. The fourth tip he gives, the fourth tip he gives is to restrain the hands, the feet, and body parts from that which is indecent. And in Surah Yasin, and I believe in the 17th Surah as well, definitely in Yasin, it talks about the feet. The hands. That all of these are going to be made to speak. That they are all going to be made to speak. And there is traditional tafsir about this. It's actually kind of interesting. That says that they'll be made to speak, and that the hands and all that will say, God, don't send me to hell. I didn't do it. I was forced. That brain of his made me do it. So the body parts will be, in essence, independent entities. So again, the fourth tip, to restrain the hands, feet, and body parts from that which is not decent. The fifth tip he mentions is to not break the fast with doubtful food. And I gave the khutbah Friday at Masjid worth الدين, and I used this example. Should we be breaking our fast at Maghrib time with a Happy Meal? People have debates as to whether you can eat the food of the Jews and the Christians. These are debates. Or if the food that you say you buy at Aldi's across the street, the meat you buy at Aldi's across the street, or the meat you buy at Kroger's or whatever, is this halal for Muslims to eat? People have these debates. And it's a long discussion, and both sides have evidences, to be honest with you. Both sides of the arguments have evidences. But he says, don't break your fast with food that is doubtful. And I don't know about anyone here, but I know in my life I have not followed this, breaking a fast with a candy bar or something like that. I don't drink soda, so I'm not guilty of that crime. Perhaps we can apply that tip, or think about that in connection to junk food, or being more conscious as to what we eat. Whether you talk about the slaughtering or not, they're conscious of eating healthy food, not always buying the stuff that has been injected with growth hormones and all that. The sixth tip that Imam Al Ghazzali rahimahullah ta'ala gives, this is the sixth and final tip, and I think this one is particularly important or particularly interesting. To be apprehensive, that's the word that's used. To be apprehensive, meaning to be in a state of, to be in a state of wondering or questioning. Has God, in fact, accepted my fast? I think that part is the most important part of what he says. To wonder, has God, in fact, accepted my fasting or our fasting? There is a dua that is found in the hadith literature, which has words, the niyyah, to be recited for the fast. And there are different wordings or different versions, and however worded, or you can make up your own words, it doesn't matter. But the dua that comes to my mind, as part of it, it says, فَتَقَبَّلْ مِنِّي إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ السَّمِيعُ الْعَلِيمُ. So accept from me. You're praying, you're making the dua when it's time, when you're making the niyyah for fasting. God, accept this from me. What if you follow all of the rules of fasting? And that can send it back to prayer. You follow all of the rules of prayer. You make sure that your feet in the right place, and your hands, when you did your prayer, they're in the right place. And for ladies, make the scarf, make sure not a single strand of hair is showing, or whatever. But you have to wonder, does God accept your prayer? So I think that what Imam Al Ghazzali is doing is that he's trying to prevent arrogance to emerge in the hearts of those who are doing the acts of fasting, or in the example I just gave, the acts of prayer. And this is something that is found in the teachings of all the prophets and all of the messengers as well. Peace be upon them all. We have Jesus, peace be upon him, in the Bible, talk about people who put large amounts of money. I'm just going to paraphrase it, the Bible, because I'm sure that you know it better than me. About people who put large amounts of money in the temple, in the collection, the charity collection, when they know people are looking, and God not accepting that. But the little old lady who has only a penny and she puts it in the secret, that God accepting that. And both texts, in this case I'm going back to the Bible and the Quran, they both have the same theme with regards to praying to be seen of men. Surah Al-Ma'un, فَوَيْلٌ لِلْمُصَلِّينَ الَّذِينَ هُمْ عَنْ صَلَاتِهِمْ سَاهُونَ الَّذِينَ هُمْ يُرَاءُونَ وَيَمْنَعُونَ الْمَاعُونَ. God condemns. It's a very strong term in Arabic. فَوَيْلٌ لِلْمُصَلِّينَ. God condemns those who pray. How does it end? Because they are praying without any surety of their prayer, without any care in their prayer. They're careless in their prayer. And moreover, they're praying because somebody sees them. They are the people who pray for politics. Their prayer is a political act. And you can extend this to the followers of other religions as well, to Christian political leaders or Jewish political leaders, or Muslim political leaders, who pray, who only do the act because it's what society expects them to do. Especially when the camera is watching. When the camera isn't watching, God knows they're doing all kinds of things. There's I got to get off at this point, but this just entered into my head. And I'm not going to say which particular president, but there's a president in the Muslim world. And there's a video of him at the Eid prayer. And it's him and, like the upper staff. And They're all praying, but nobody knows ruku. No, they all got it all mixed up because they're not used to doing it. The cameras are there, but since they're not used to doing it, they've kind of forgotten. So, it just looks like a circus. That yoga or something. So Imam Al Ghazzali in his tip here, to be apprehensive or wondering if God has in fact accepted the fast. He's trying to prevent complacency. That's a word I should have used before. Complacency, because complacency can breed arrogance, and complacency can breed ignorance as well. So the few words that I have shared, these are not words that are meant to say the hell with the rules of fasting. I don't mean to say it like that. I don't want to give that impression. Sometimes I talk about these things and people take away another meaning different than what I had intended to convey. The rules are important. They are important. There's no doubt about that. And we can even talk about each and single point, what rule is there and why is important. So yes, we want to follow the use the terminology. We want to follow the fiqh rules. We want to do it right. We want to do everything right. But we don't want to forget the spirit of fasting. There's a reason that we do it. We want the outer rules to influence the interior. This is what we want. And going back to the ayah, كما كتب على الذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون. Going back to that statement, the whole purpose of fasting is to generate taqwa. That's what Allah says. Now, other people and other faith traditions, of course there are people who fast for diet. Of course there's that. It had no even pretense of a religious element to it. But in other religions and other traditions and other trends in religions, people fast, to commemorate someone's death, or to commemorate somebody's birth, or to commemorate somebody's martyrdom. Say in the Catholic tradition, to commemorate someone's martyrdom. They fast like it's a holiday thing. It's a holiday thing. But God says that the reason that you fast is for taqwa, to try to increase your connection and your awareness of Him, to try to strengthen your relationship with Him. And there's a hadith Qudsi, the hadith of Muhammad, peace be upon him, that is actually words that are conveyed from God to Muhammad, but they're not the words of the Quran, not the words of the Prophet. So they call it hadith Qudsi, sacred hadith. And there's a hadith that says that the reward of the fast, that's hadith Qudsi, the reward of someone's fasting is what? Me. That God says the reward of fasting is Himself. That doesn't mean that He comes in the person of Master Prophet Muhammad or something. No, it means that the reward of fasting is that you become closer to God. This is the meaning of that. So we want to nourish our taqwa in a real and present manner. And this is what we seek to do in these days of fasting, in these days of restraint. So I don't have much more to say about this. So for the moment, I will ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept all of our fasting and any good actions that we do, that He accepted from us, and that it be something that will benefit us, particularly on the day of judgment. Wa akhir da'wana and alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Any reflections or comments or questions?
Anyone have questions for Brother?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Appreciate your comment.
Thank you.
You mentioned the fact that there is obviously mistakes or intentional wrong way of doing prayer and fasting.
Sure.
When I hear that situation, I'm always thinking about Ar-Rahman,
Sure.
most merciful.
Sure.
And that I personally try not to make those mistakes intentionally.
Sure.
But, and I know Allah sees my intent, but is there a means of measurement to determine how far the mistakes go before they become a problem, so to speak? Or is that even practical? Do you even consider that?
If I understand your question correctly, it will reflect in what I'm going to say. If I don't understand, please let me know.
Okay.
All right. In the Prophet Muhammad's statements, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we have many statements in which, let me give this example. You wake up and you have your cup of coffee, or you have your tea or whatever, and then in the middle of drinking it, and you, oh my God, I'm fasting. And I think that's happened to all of us at some point or another in our life. So the Prophet says, and this is something which I don't believe there's any disagreement about among Muslims. The Prophet says, this is God's gift to you. So if you make a mistake like that, you keep fasting. Now, there are deeper things. So, and forgive me for saying it like this. So what about people who have sexual relations while fasting? That's a deeper thing than just forgetting, right? Just forgetting you're eating your food, but having physical relations, during the period where you're supposed to be fasting. There is penalty for, forgive me to use that term, but there's penalty for that. And the penalty for that is bigger. Is probably the biggest one. So the processes for that. So let me go back to that example. Okay. So what's the process for that? Anyone know? Like that you see in the Quran and Hadith about people who have physical relations during fasting. What is it? Want to share it?
Yes.
What is it? What is it?
You got to feed so many people, and plus fast. It's a deep process. A long
deep process.
Right.
So you have a choice of feeding, if I remember correctly, 60 people.
Right. Yeah.
Or fasting 2 months.
Right. Yeah.
For the people in this room, this is probably possible. The feeding part is probably people think it's impossible to do, but it's actually possible to do. It doesn't mean you take 60 people to Red Lobster. It doesn't mean that. Simple food is fine, but it has to feed for 60 people, and how you arrange it, the details of that is your business. So there are processes. If I understood your question correctly, there are processes, and even going back to some hadiths on the matter. Maybe it's impossible to do these things. Maybe it's impossible to fast for two months to make up that one day of that. Maybe it's impossible to feed 60 poor people. Maybe you're the poorest person in the community. That's actually happened according to the hadith literature in time of the Prophet. So there are processes, and we try to do what we can. And the Quran says, فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُمْ. It says to have taqwa as much as to your capacity. Do what you can do. You're not expected to become a miracle worker. You're not expected to be able to fend off bullets like Superman or something. We're all Clark Kents. No one here is Superman. Did I understand your question correctly?
You did.
Okay.